The vast emptiness of space stretched infinitely in every direction, broken only by the shimmering lights of distant stars. It was a sight of beauty, of peace, but for the commanders of the Galactic Armada, it was only the calm before a storm. Thousands of ships, massive warships, advanced cruisers, and sleek, deadly fighters drifted slowly toward the heart of the galaxy, where the final battle was about to unfold. This was the moment that would decide the fate of the galaxy. For decades, the Armada had been the most powerful military force in the known universe. It had crushed countless enemies, scattered entire civilizations to the wind, and dominated every battlefield it had entered. The alien species that made up the Armada's ranks believed they were unstoppable. They were proud, confident. They had never faced an enemy they couldn't crush in seconds. Now the final battle would be fought against a species that had only recently made its appearance on the galactic stage: humans. The very idea that these primitive creatures could challenge the Armada's might was laughable to most of the alien commanders. The humans had no real experience in war, no real fleet to speak of, and certainly no technology to rival the advanced weaponry the Armada possessed. General Kohler, commander of the Ulnar Empire's fleet, stood on the bridge of his flagship, gazing out into the void. His officers were busy making final preparations, calibrating weapons systems, and running battle simulations, but Kohler's mind was far from the task at hand. He was thinking of the humans. His thoughts were interrupted by the voice of his lieutenant, who entered the room with a concerned look on her face. "General, there's something strange. We're detecting an anomaly near the outer rim of the battlefield." Kohler's brow furrowed in confusion. The scans had already swept the area multiple times, and there had been no sign of the humans or any other force. The only ships in the area were the Armada's own, spread out in a well-ordered formation. "Show me the readings," Kohler ordered. The lieutenant quickly moved to the console and brought up a detailed map of the space around them. Kohler's eyes scanned the readout, and his pulse quickened as he saw the anomaly. A blip on the radar, faint but unmistakable. It was a single, solitary ship. "Could it be a decoy?" the lieutenant asked. "Not likely," Kohler muttered. "We've analyzed their technology for weeks. They don't have the capability to create such an advanced radar signature. This ship, whatever it is, appears out of nowhere." The officers around him exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, the calm atmosphere on the bridge was replaced by a sense of tension, something Kohler had not felt in years. He had led the Armada into battle against entire fleets, never once doubting their victory. But now, something felt different. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he knew this battle would not be like any other. Kohler leaned forward, studying the radar closely. "Increase scan sensitivity. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." The crew worked quickly, enhancing the scan and focusing on the faint blip that seemed to grow larger with every passing second. It wasn't moving quickly, but it was approaching the battlefield at a steady pace. Kohler's thoughts raced. Could it be a scouting vessel? A single human ship out here, so far from home? It didn't make sense. He watched as the blip on the screen grew larger and clearer. It was no ordinary ship. The sheer size of it was impossible to ignore. It was large, massive, in fact, much larger than anything Kohler had anticipated. And it was headed straight toward the heart of the battlefield, where the Armada's forces were assembling for the final clash. The bridge fell silent as Kohler stood, his mind racing. His worst fears were beginning to form. This wasn't just a random encounter. This ship, this unknown vessel, was part of a larger strategy. Perhaps a decoy, perhaps something more. But what could a human ship possibly do in the face of the entire Galactic Armada? "General," came the voice of his communications officer. "We've intercepted a transmission from the ship." The transmission was clear and direct, though the words sent a chill down Kohler's spine. It was in the universal tongue, the language shared by all the intelligent species of the galaxy. The message was brief, almost curt. "We are here. Prepare yourselves." The words sent shockwaves through the room. It wasn't a plea for peace or a warning to back off. No, This message was cold, confident, and full of intent. The humans were here, and they were not retreating. The arrogance of their boldness left Kohler speechless for a moment. He looked out at the endless stretch of stars, his mind turning over the possibilities. The Armada had conquered countless worlds, annihilated more powerful enemies than these humans could ever dream of becoming. Yet this single ship had just made a declaration. And for the first time, Kohler felt the uneasy stirrings of doubt. He could sense the confusion and concern rippling through his crew. They, too, had believed the humans to be nothing more than primitive life forms with no understanding of true warfare. But now, here they were, with a ship that appeared to defy logic. Kohler could almost hear the question echoing in his mind. What was this ship? And how could it be so confident? Without warning, the ship on the radar shifted its position, and the feeling of anticipation hung in the air. The calm before the storm had ended. The battle was about to begin. Kohler's hands clenched into fists. There was no turning back now. The warships of the Armada were ready. They would strike fast, strike hard. But as he watched the human ship draw nearer, he couldn't shake the feeling that this battle would change everything. And that terrified him. The human ship drew closer with a steady, almost deliberate pace. On the bridge of the Ulnar flagship, General Kohler's eyes remained fixed on the screen, a mix of confusion and disbelief settling over him. The closer it got, the clearer it became that this was no ordinary vessel. It was unlike anything they had ever encountered, its design sleek and angular, cutting through space with an almost eerie grace. It didn't belong to any known human faction. The technology behind it was far beyond anything the Armada had expected. The ship's energy signatures were unlike anything the scans had ever detected before. Powerful, yet strangely controlled. Kohler's mind raced. How had they built such a ship? How had these humans, a species with no history of galactic warfare, managed to construct something so advanced? There was no time to answer those questions now. The strange ship was within firing range, and the Armada's forces were ready. The aliens had always been masters of space warfare, their ships huge and powerful, with weapons capable of vaporizing entire fleets. They had never needed to fear any enemy. But this human ship, this one ship, was different. Kohler's unease only grew as the communications officer's voice cut through the tension in the room. "General, we're receiving another transmission." The message was short, but its impact was immediate. This time, there was no greeting, no formality. The voice that came through the comms was cold, unshaken, and confident, too confident. "We've come for you." Kohler's grip tightened around the armrest of his chair. The arrogance of this message sent a chill through the entire bridge. Who were these humans? Did they really think they could stand against the might of the Armada with a single ship? Without waiting for a reply, the human ship made its first move. It wasn't a warning shot or a feint, it was a full-scale assault. The massive vessel released a powerful beam of light that struck the nearest ulnar cruiser with incredible precision. The cruiser's shields flickered for a moment before the beam tore through them like paper, ripping the ship apart in an instant. The explosion was violent, a massive burst of energy that sent debris scattering in all directions. The crew on the bridge watched in stunned silence as the once proud cruiser was reduced to nothing more than a cloud of space dust. Kohler stood up in shock, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. One strike. One. They had never seen firepower like this before. The human ship didn't just break through their defenses. It annihilated them with surgical precision. And it didn't stop. Before the Armada could react, the human ship fired again, targeting a different cruiser. This time, the blast hit even harder, tearing through the hull like a hot knife through butter. The crew's panicked screams echoed through the communication channels as the ship was torn apart in seconds. The alien fleet began to fall into chaos. The shock was palpable, the kind of disarray that only comes when an invincible force is suddenly challenged. Kohler's mind raced as he tried to organize a counterattack. He knew he had to act quickly before the human ship destroyed more of their fleet. "We need to regroup," Kohler barked, trying to regain control of the situation. "Send out the fighters. Prepare to launch a full assault. All ships, engage at once." The order was given, but the human warship didn't seem to care. It simply moved with a calm, deliberate pace, almost as if mocking the Armada's response. It was faster than any of their ships, evading their attacks with ease, weaving through the oncoming fire like a shadow, always just out of reach. Kohler watched in disbelief as his fighters were cut down one by one. Their advanced weapons fire bounced off the human ship's shield like it was nothing. No matter how many they sent, no matter how much firepower they unleashed, the human ship seemed to absorb it all, barely even flinching. It was then that Kohler understood. This wasn't just a ship. It was a weapon, a symbol of something far beyond what he had anticipated. The humans weren't just here to fight. They were here to win. And as the battle raged on, Kohler felt the impossible truth sink in. They were losing. The Armada, the greatest fleet the galaxy had ever known, was being torn apart by a single human warship. How was this possible? As the seconds ticked by, the human ship unleashed yet another devastating attack, this time aimed at the flagship itself. The Ulnar flagship, the pride of their fleet, trembled as the blast slammed into its shields. But the shields didn't hold. With a deafening roar, the energy burst ripped through the outer hull, sending sparks flying and causing the entire ship to shudder violently. The bridge was thrown into chaos, alarms blaring, crew members shouting orders, trying desperately to salvage control. But it was clear now. They were outmatched. The human warship had proven itself unstoppable, and the Armada was no longer in control. Kohler's mind raced as the full extent of the situation became clear. How could they have been so wrong about humanity? How had they underestimated these primitive creatures? The Ulnar Empire's might had always been the cornerstone of the galaxy's power, but now it was crumbling, falling apart piece by piece. The human ship, with its unimaginable power and precision, had shattered their invincible facade. And as Kohler stared out into the cold abyss of space, he realized one terrifying truth. The galaxy would never be the same again. The situation quickly spiraled out of control. The Ulnar fleet, once the dominant force in the galaxy, was now in full retreat. Their pride, their technological superiority, their vast numbers, none of it mattered. The human warship, with its chilling precision and unrelenting firepower, seemed to have one goal in mind: total annihilation. It didn't take long before the aliens realized that this battle wasn't just about winning or losing, it was about survival. General Kohler's hands gripped the armrests of his chair as the bridge of his flagship plunged into chaos. The monitors around him flickered, showing the devastation unfolding outside. The once mighty fleet that had spread across the battlefield like a deadly swarm was now a disorganized mess of burning wreckage and crippled ships. As the human warship methodically took out each cruiser and destroyer, the remaining Ulnar ships were left helpless, their shields failing one by one, their weapons useless against an enemy they could barely comprehend. "General," the communications officer's voice trembled as she spoke, "we're losing all communication with the fleet. The entire left wing is down. They're retreating, but there's nowhere to go. The human ship is blocking their escape routes." Kohler's mind raced. What kind of weapon was this? What kind of technology allowed one ship to cripple an entire fleet so effortlessly? His once strong confidence in the Armada was fading fast, replaced by a deep-seated fear he hadn't felt in years. Fear of an unknown enemy. Fear of humanity. The human warship didn't relent. It didn't give them a single moment to recover. It had already targeted their command ships, those that were responsible for coordinating the fleets, and in seconds they were reduced to nothing but wreckage. With each passing minute, the situation became direr. The Ulnar ships couldn't hold up. The smaller, less advanced craft were the first to fall, disappearing into the darkness of space in an instant. The larger ships tried to retaliate, but their attacks seemed pointless, like ants trying to sting a giant. The human ship continued its relentless assault, moving with the same calculated grace, firing with precision. Each shot seemed perfectly timed, each explosion perfectly placed, taking down their shields before any counterattack could land. Kohler's heart raced. He'd been in many battles, fought in wars across the galaxy, but nothing had ever prepared him for this. He had underestimated the humans, underestimated them in the worst possible way. "Activate the fleet's emergency escape protocol," Kohler commanded, his voice edged with panic. "We must regroup. All ships, disengage. We'll pull back to the outer rim." But even as he gave the order, Kohler knew it was too late. The human warship's drones, sleek, fast, and devastating, had already spread across the battlefield. They were everywhere. Small, fast, and relentless, they moved with a mind of their own, cutting down every remaining fighter and disabling every escape pod. Even the massive ships of the Armada, which were designed to withstand enemy fire, couldn't stand up to the overwhelming power and speed of these drones. One by one, the Ulnar ships were disabled, their systems fried by a series of powerful EMP blasts. The battlefield was a graveyard of lost ships, floating in the vast emptiness of space like broken toys. The human warship was still there, its shields shimmering in the distance, absorbing everything the Armada could throw at it. It had no reason to rush, no reason to even move quickly. It was in full control. The human ship was like a predator in its element, moving among its prey with deliberate care, ensuring that every strike was a lethal one. Kohler's eyes darted across the control panel, his mind struggling to come up with a strategy. A plan. Something, anything that could stop the human ship from wiping out the last remnants of his fleet. His officers were shouting orders, trying desperately to coordinate a counteroffensive, but it was hopeless. The communication systems were down. The rest of the fleet was scattered, disorganized, and broken. There was no unity anymore, just chaos. Suddenly, a voice broke through the confusion. It was the voice of the communications officer again, though this time, her voice was barely audible, trembling with fear. "General, the human ship it's coming towards us." Kohler's heart skipped a beat. The human ship, which had been picking off their forces one by one, was now turning its attention toward the Ulnar flagship. Slowly, it approached, and with each passing second, the pressure mounted. Kohler could feel the weight of it in his chest. He had led countless battles, stood firm against overwhelming odds. But this was different. The cold, calculated power of the human ship was unlike anything he had ever faced. There was no chance for diplomacy. There was no way out. The flagship's shields flickered weakly, already drained from the previous barrage. The human warship was almost close enough now to strike with full force. Every officer on the bridge was silent, eyes wide with fear, watching as the massive ship approached. Then, without warning, the human warship fired again. This time, the blast was aimed directly at the flagship. It wasn't a single shot, but a series of rapid bursts, tearing through the flagship's shields in seconds. Kohler's ears rang with the deafening sound of the impact as the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared, and the lights on the bridge flickered. The flagship groaned in protest, but it was already clear. It wouldn't hold. The bridge crew scrambled to regain control, but Kohler could see the truth in their eyes. The flagship was done. It was only a matter of time before it would be destroyed, just like every other ship in the fleet. Kohler clenched his fists, his mind blank. How had it come to this? How had one human ship torn apart the greatest military force in the galaxy? Was this the end of the Armada? As the human warship's final attack hit the flagship, a deep, shuddering explosion rocked the entire ship. The lights went out completely, and the bridge was plunged into darkness. Kohler could feel the weight of defeat bearing down on him, a crushing pressure that no military leader should ever have to experience. The Armada, the once mighty force that had ruled the galaxy, was falling. And as Kohler stood there, surrounded by the destruction of his fleet, One question lingered in his mind. What now? The aftermath of the attack was a scene of utter devastation. The Ulnar flagship, once a symbol of power and invincibility, was now a dying hulk drifting in the cold silence of space. Its once shining hull was scorched, blackened, and torn apart, and the bridge, where General Kohler had stood only moments before, was now a smoldering ruin. The crew members who had once operated the ship with precision and discipline now fought to stay alive in the wreckage, their voices echoing in the darkened hallways, desperate and panicked. Outside, the battlefield was unrecognizable. The once proud fleet of the Galactic Armada was now a graveyard of broken ships. Debris floated in every direction. Fragments of destroyed cruisers, twisted metal, and the scattered remains of fighter jets. The powerful engines of the Armada's flagship had been silenced, its once glowing energy cores now cold and dormant. The wrecks of the other ships dotted the expanse of space like a reminder of the price of underestimating humanity. On the bridge of the human warship, a calm silence settled in as the crew monitored the aftermath. The mission was complete. The battle had been won, not just by firepower, but by the overwhelming sense of purpose behind every action. There was no celebration, no victory cry. The human crew worked in practiced unison, their eyes fixed on the viewports where the Armada's remnants drifted in the cold vacuum. It wasn't pride that kept them focused. It was the knowledge that their actions had changed the course of history. Inside the warship's command center, Captain Arlo, the leader of the human fleet, stared out into the distance. He had led his forces with a calm determination, but now that the fight was over, the weight of what had just occurred began to settle in. It had been too easy, too swift. The Armada, the most powerful military force in the galaxy, had been brought to its knees by a single human ship. The irony of it all wasn't lost on him. Only a few years ago, humanity had been considered insignificant, an afterthought in the galactic order. Now, they had crushed a force that had dominated the stars for millennia. "We've done it," said Lieutenant Kara, her voice breaking the silence. "We've crushed them." Arlo didn't respond immediately. He continued to stare at the destruction outside. "We didn't just crush them," he said quietly. "We sent a message to everyone in this galaxy. Humanity isn't here to take part. We're here to take over." The implications of his words hung heavy in the room. The battle had been more than just a victory. It was a declaration of dominance. The Galactic Armada had been a symbol of power for so long, and now that symbol lay in ruins. The human warship had arrived in the galaxy as an unknown entity, a mere whisper in the cosmic winds, and now it had become a force to be reckoned with. The shockwaves of this battle would reverberate across the stars. No longer would the galaxy view humanity as weak, as unworthy of consideration. Now, they would know better. But even as Arlo spoke, he knew that this victory came at a cost. There would be consequences. There were always consequences when power was seized by force. What would the rest of the galaxy think of this brutal display of strength? What would the other empires, the other alien species, do in response? The humans had proven themselves capable of annihilating a fleet far superior to anything they could have imagined. But what if other factions, perhaps those with even more powerful fleets, decided that humanity's time in the galaxy had come to an end? "I don't know if they'll ever forget this," Kara said, her voice heavy with contemplation. "The other empires, they won't just sit back and let us take over. The peace that existed before this battle, it's gone now. They'll come after us." Arlo nodded, his gaze unwavering. "They'll come, but it won't matter. Let them come. We've shown them what we're capable of. We've made them see that we won't back down, no matter what." A tense silence followed his words. As the crew members worked quietly in the background, Arlo allowed himself a moment of reflection. This was just the beginning. The Armada had been the first, one of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy, but there were others out there. Others who would seek to challenge humanity's place in the universe. This battle had set the tone for what was to come. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had arrived, and there was no turning back now. Meanwhile, far beyond the reach of human influence, the news of the battle's outcome had already begun to spread. The other galactic powers were starting to take notice. The Andron Coalition, the Vortec Dominion, and the Salthar Federation, all of them, once content to overlook humanity as a primitive species, were now forced to reconsider their position. The moment the human warship had engaged the Armada, it had shattered the peace that had held the galaxy in balance. Now, every major empire would have to determine how to respond to this new threat, or perhaps a new opportunity. Back on the human warship, the crew continued to move with military precision, readying themselves for whatever came next. They had fought and won with incredible speed, but they knew the war had just begun. The real challenge would be holding the ground they had taken. Other powers would rise, and they would come for humanity. But they were ready. The human warship was more than just a ship, it was a statement. And as Arlo looked out into the endless expanse of stars, his thoughts remained resolute. They had made their mark on the galaxy. Now it was time to ensure that it would never be forgotten. On the bridge of the human warship, a calm silence settled in as the crew monitored the aftermath. The mission was complete. The battle had been won, not just by firepower, but by the overwhelming sense of purpose behind every action. There was no celebration, no victory cry. The human crew worked in practiced unison, their eyes fixed on the viewports where the Armada's remnants drifted in the cold vacuum. It wasn't pride that kept them focused. It was the knowledge that their actions had changed the course of history. Inside the warship's command center, Captain Arlo, the leader of the human fleet, stared out into the distance. He had led his forces with a calm determination, but now that the fight was over, the weight of what had just occurred began to settle in. It had been too easy, too swift. The Armada, the most powerful military force in the galaxy, had been brought to its knees by a single human ship. The irony of it all wasn't lost on him. Only a few years ago, humanity had been considered insignificant, an afterthought in the galactic order. Now they had crushed a force that had dominated the stars for millennia. "We've done it," said Lieutenant Kara, her voice breaking the silence. "We've crushed them." Arlo didn't respond immediately. He continued to stare at the destruction outside. "We didn't just crush them," he said quietly. "We sent a message to everyone in this galaxy. Humanity isn't here to take part. We're here to take over." The implications of his words hung heavy in the room. The battle had been more than just a victory. It was a declaration of dominance. The Galactic Armada had been a symbol of power for so long, and now that symbol lay in ruins. The human warship had arrived in the galaxy as an unknown entity, a mere whisper in the cosmic winds, and now it had become a force to be reckoned with. The shockwaves of this battle would reverberate across the stars. No longer would the galaxy view humanity as weak, as unworthy of consideration. Now, they would know better. But even as Arlo spoke, he knew that this victory came at a cost. There would be consequences. There were always consequences when power was seized by force. What would the rest of the galaxy think of this brutal display of strength? What would the other empires, the other alien species, do in response? The humans had proven themselves capable of annihilating a fleet far superior to anything they could have imagined. But what if other factions, perhaps those with even more powerful fleets, decided that humanity's time in the galaxy had come to an end? "I don't know if they'll ever forget this," Kara said, her voice heavy with contemplation. "The other empires, they won't just sit back and let us take over. The peace that existed before this battle, it's gone now. They'll come after us." Arlo nodded, his gaze unwavering. "They'll come, but it won't matter. Let them come. We've shown them what we're capable of. We've made them see that we won't back down, no matter what." A tense silence followed his words. As the crew members worked quietly in the background, Arlo allowed himself a moment of reflection. This was just the beginning. The Armada had been the first, one of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy, but there were others out there. others who would seek to challenge humanity's place in the universe. This battle had set the tone for what was to come. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had arrived, and there was no turning back now. Meanwhile, far beyond the reach of human influence, the news of the battle's outcome had already begun to spread. The other galactic powers were starting to take notice. The Andron Coalition, the Vortec Dominion, and the Salthar Federation, all of them, once content to overlook humanity as a primitive species, were now forced to reconsider their position. The moment the human warship had engaged the Armada, it had shattered the peace that had held the galaxy in balance. Now, every major empire would have to determine how to respond to this new threat, or perhaps a new opportunity. Back on the human warship, the crew continued to move with military precision, readying themselves for whatever came next. They had fought and won with incredible speed, but they knew the war had just begun. The real challenge would be holding the ground they had taken. Other powers would rise, and they would come for humanity. But they were ready. The human warship was more than just a ship. It was a statement. And as Arlo looked out into the endless expanse of stars, his thoughts remained resolute. They had made their mark on the galaxy. Now it was time to ensure that it would never be forgotten. The galaxy was waking up to a new reality. News of humanity's shocking victory over the Ulnar Armada spread like wildfire through the cosmos, igniting waves of fear, anger, and intrigue. The once untouchable galactic empires, long accustomed to their dominance, were now forced to confront the presence of a force they had once dismissed as insignificant. For the first time in centuries, the balance of power had shifted, and no one knew exactly what to expect next. On the human warship, Captain Arlo stood on the observation deck, gazing out at the stars. The vastness of space felt different now, more tangible, more dangerous. The victory had been overwhelming, but it hadn't come without consequences. There was no denying the power they had unleashed. But the galaxy wasn't going to simply accept humanity's rise to power. They would retaliate. They would come for the humans. The question wasn't if, but when. As Arlo pondered the inevitable, his mind was interrupted by the voice of Lieutenant Kara, who approached with a somber expression. "Captain, we've received transmissions from several galactic powers. They're calling an emergency council. They want to discuss the implications of our actions." Arlo sighed and turned to face her. "Let me guess. They want to know if we're planning to invade every system in the galaxy next." Kara nodded. "They're concerned. Some are worried about retaliation. Others, they want to form alliances. The rest, though, they're uncertain. They don't know if humanity is a threat or a possible ally yet. The galaxy is watching, Captain." Arlo took a deep breath. It was clear the real fight had only just begun. Their victory over the Armada had sent a message, but now the galaxy was watching to see what humanity would do with this newfound power. They could go the route of diplomacy, trying to negotiate with the other empires and secure a place in galactic society. Or they could rise up as conquerors, taking what they wanted by force and threatening anyone who opposed them. "We'll have to tread carefully," Arlo said, his voice heavy with responsibility. "We can't just go in guns blazing, no matter how tempting it might be. If we want to make our mark in this galaxy, we need to show them that we're not just about destruction. We're about leadership. We've already sent a message. Now it's time to decide what kind of message we want to send next." Kara nodded but didn't look entirely convinced. She understood the gravity of the situation. The human warship had proven its capabilities. But now the real challenge lay in maintaining power and establishing influence. And with every move they made, there would be eyes on them. Alien eyes, calculating their next steps, weighing their options. Back in the heart of the galaxy, the other empires had already begun their preparations. The Ulnar defeat had shaken them to their core. And now the other galactic powers were scrambling to form alliances, fortify their defenses, and determine how to handle the sudden appearance of humanity as a major player on the galactic stage. The Andron Coalition, a militaristic empire known for its ruthlessness, was the first to act. Their vast fleet, though powerful, had always been wary of the ulnar. They had secretly admired their strength, but never openly challenged them. Now the Andron leaders were making contingency plans for a potential war with humanity. If the humans could defeat the ulnar so easily, what would stop them from doing the same to the Andron? We cannot afford to underestimate them, Admiral Zarek of the Andron Coalition said to his council. The humans have shown us that they're capable of far more than we anticipated. We must act now, while they are still in the process of regrouping. They may have won a single battle, but they're still fragile, new to the game. We have a chance to destroy them before they rise any further. On the other side of the galaxy, the Vortec Dominion, a race of enigmatic alien beings with advanced psychic abilities, had also begun its deliberations. Their empire was built on secrecy and power, and they had no interest in seeing humanity grow stronger. They had kept to themselves for millennia, avoiding conflict with other empires. But now, the existence of humanity as a force to be reckoned with threatened their carefully constructed isolation. The humans must be contained, Vortec High Lord Valis said in a private meeting with his closest advisors. They are dangerous, not just because of their technology, but because of what they represent. A new force in the galaxy. If we allow them to grow, we risk everything we've worked for. We must eliminate this threat before it becomes too large to handle. Even the Sci-Fi Federation, a peaceful yet highly advanced civilization known for their scientific prowess, began to question whether humanity could be trusted. They had never involved themselves in galactic politics, but now, with humanity's sudden rise to power, they were reconsidering their stance. Should they form an alliance with the humans, or should they prepare for conflict? The Kalthar had always believed that peace was the best path forward, but humanity had just rewritten the rules. The reactions were varied, but one thing was clear. Humanity had shaken the galaxy to its core. The other empires had been united in their certainty that they were the dominant powers, but now they were scrambling to make sense of this new unknown force. The galaxy would never be the same. Back on the human warship, Captain Arlo and his crew prepared for the diplomatic challenges ahead. They were aware of the growing tension in the galaxy, and while they had the power to wipe out any opposition, the captain knew that taking the high road would be a far more difficult, but ultimately more rewarding, path. Prepare a message to the Galactic Council, Arlo ordered, his voice steady but firm. Let them know we are ready to engage in talks. Humanity will not be a threat unless forced to be one. We want peace, but we will fight if we must. We will not bow down to anyone. The crew worked quickly, transmitting the message across the galaxy. As they sent their message of peace, and perhaps of warning, Arlo allowed himself a moment to consider what was to come. The warship, which had once seemed like just another tool of destruction, had now become a symbol of humanity's power and resolve, and the entire galaxy was watching to see what they would do next. The galaxy had never felt so small, so full of tension. As humanity's message rippled out to the distant corners of space, the response from the other galactic powers came quickly, like a tidal wave crashing over the delicate fabric of the galaxy's old order. The Andron Coalition, the Vortec Dominion, the Sci-Fi Federation, and many others were aligning themselves, either to prepare for war or to stake their claim in this new, uncertain era. Captain Arlo stood once again on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. His mind was heavy with the burden of what lay ahead. He had fought the battle, won it decisively, but now the real war had begun, an ideological and political war that would decide the fate of humanity in the galaxy. The message had been sent, but Arlo knew it wasn't enough. It was just the beginning. His thoughts were interrupted when Lieutenant Kara stepped onto the deck, holding a datapad. "Captain, we've just received communications from the Vortec Dominion," she said, her face grim. "They've agreed to meet, but only under very strict conditions." Arlo raised an eyebrow. The Vortec were known for their mysterious ways, using advanced psychic powers to manipulate both people and events. If they were reaching out, It meant humanity was no longer seen as a mere curiosity, but a serious player in galactic politics. Still, there was no telling whether the Vortex saw humanity as a potential ally or a threat that needed to be controlled. "What are their conditions?" Arlo asked, turning to face Kara. "They're demanding a show of force," Kara replied. "They want us to demonstrate that we have the power to back up our words. They won't speak unless we prove that we can hold our ground against any adversary." Arlo nodded, his lips pressed tightly together. The Vortex were no strangers to power, and they wouldn't accept anything less than total confidence. They would not deal with weakness, and certainly not with those they considered beneath them. If they were asking for a demonstration of force, it was clear they were sizing humanity up, trying to determine if they could be trusted or if they should be eliminated. "We'll show them that we have more than just firepower," Arlo said, his voice low and steady. "Prepare the fleet for a demonstration, but make it clear that we're not here to start a war. We're here to make our place in this galaxy, on our terms." Kara nodded and turned to relay the order. Arlo continued to stare out at the vast expanse of space. He knew that the coming confrontation would test humanity's resolve like never before. It wasn't enough to win a battle. They now had to prove they could navigate the treacherous politics of the galaxy. The next few hours were a blur of activity. The human warship, along with its fleet, moved into position at the agreed-upon rendezvous point, deep within Vortex space. Arlo knew the risks. The Vortex had one of the most sophisticated fleets in the galaxy, and they were known for their ability to warp reality itself. If they decided that humanity was too much of a threat, they could erase them from existence with a thought. The human fleet held their positions, waiting. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as the tension in the air grew. Every officer aboard the warship was on high alert, anticipating any move the Vortex might make. The air was thick with uncertainty, but also with determination. They weren't going to back down. Not now, not after everything they had fought for. Suddenly, a flash of light appeared on the horizon of the stars. It was the Vortex fleet, massive and looming, with ships that seemed to shimmer and distort, as though reality itself bent around them. The human warship powered up its weapons, but Arlo ordered them to stand down. He wasn't here to start another battle. He was here to show strength without unnecessary bloodshed. The Vortex ships slowed, their lead vessel, their flagship, advancing toward the human fleet. As it drew closer, a strange hum filled the air, like a deep, resonant vibration, as though the very fabric of space was being manipulated. The flagship's hull shimmered with an unnatural glow, and the voice of the Vortex leader, High Lord Valis, echoed across the comm system. "Humanity," his voice was calm, almost ethereal. "You have made your mark in the galaxy, but your actions have not gone unnoticed. We are here to see if you are truly the force you claim to be." Arlo stepped forward to the comms panel, his gaze unwavering. "We are here to show that humanity is not a threat to the galaxy, but a force for order. We will not bend to those who would seek to control us, but we will cooperate with those who are willing to build a future of peace. If you believe in the future of this galaxy, then you will find that humanity is your ally. If not, then you will see how dangerous an enemy we can be." There was a long pause as High Lord Valis considered the message. Then his voice returned, now tinged with amusement. "You speak with confidence, human, but words are cheap. Let us see if your actions can match them." At that moment, the Vortex fleet shifted. The flagship's massive crystalline structure shimmered once again, and in an instant, a powerful psychic pulse surged through the space between them. The human ships felt it, an overwhelming force that pushed against their very minds, like an invisible hand trying to crush their will. For a moment, the officers aboard the warship struggled to maintain control, their senses assaulted by the Vortex psychic power. But the human warship's systems held strong. The pulse, though potent, was not enough to breach their shields or systems. Arlo stood his ground, refusing to let the Vortex see even a hint of weakness. With a calm, almost unnerving voice, he spoke again. "We've shown you our strength," he said. "Now it's time to see if you can match it." The silence that followed was thick, almost unbearable. The Vortec were powerful, no doubt, but humanity had something they didn't: resilience, determination, and an unwavering will to survive and thrive in this galaxy. The psychic pulse faded, and the tension in the air loosened. For the first time, the Vortec seemed to hesitate, as though they had come to the realization that humanity was not the same as all the other races they had conquered before. "We have seen enough," High Lord Valis said finally, his voice still calm, but with an edge of respect. "You are more than mere pests. Humanity has proven that it can hold its own. We will not destroy you, but neither will we be your allies without further testing. Consider this the beginning of our relationship, one built on strength, not diplomacy." The Vortec fleet began to pull away, leaving the humans to ponder the future. The meeting was over, but it had set the stage for something much larger. Humanity had shown its strength, and the galaxy had watched. There would be no more underestimating them. But the question remained: what would they do next? Would they seek to establish peace, or would they continue to rise, their power growing with each passing day, until they were the uncontested rulers of the stars? As the Vortec fleet disappeared into the distance, Arlo stared at the stars once again. The journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The galaxy had been shaken, and now, humanity would have to decide whether to reach out and form alliances, or to conquer and command. The human warship was a symbol of what they had achieved, but it was also a reminder of what they could become. And as Arlo turned back to the crew, he knew this much: humanity was not going to stop until they had secured their place in the stars. And no force, no matter how powerful, was going to take that away from them.